Okay, I'm going to go live now. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day of the Festival of Breakbulk. We have had a great day yesterday. We had over 68 meetings made online, 3 fantastic sessions from a variety of speakers. The first session starting with hinterland connections, then going on to some project cargo logistics in a COVID era, and then a specialist session on next gen. We now, this morning, have a session from Dr Miquel Roca from LMA Legal, who is going to take us through the Incoterms for 2020 and beyond. And if I could just bring Miquel in. Welcome, Miquel, and thank you for taking the session. We have a few participants on. This session is going to be available, obviously live and on demand. So I'd just like to welcome all the attendees that we already have on. I'm sure some more are going to join throughout the course of the session, but I'll hand over to Miquel. And thank him again for taking the session.
Yeah, thank you very much. It is my pleasure. All right, so good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen, so not sure if you can see it. Hopefully you can. Mark, can you confirm that you guys can see my screen?
Yep, screen's available and everyone can see it.
Okay, excellent. Can you see my mouse scrolling around so that I can play with it and point to the most important parts of the slides? Can you see
Indeed.
that? Great. All right. So, okay, so good morning, everybody. We're gonna talk about the Incoterms 2020. There are some new features that came into force in January when they came into force, substituting the 2010 Incoterms, and they have, of course, an impact on breakbulk contracts, as they do have an impact on any other type of transport contract that we have in the industry. So I thought it would be good to guide you through it. I promise not to be too long. I will try to focus on actually what we can identify as probably the best. And the probably most interesting features of the Incoterms 2020. If you have any questions, I will try to. We have a chat that I think it's working and available. If I just come across any of your questions, I will just scoop it in. Otherwise, if you just leave it there, Mark in the end, it's gonna feed me those questions to me. Good morning from Halifax. Yes, good morning. Good morning from London. Great to have you. All right, so let's get started. Right, so obviously you're talking to a lawyer based in London, so I need to put a disclaimer up. Obviously, this is just a presentation I have prepared for explanatory purposes. So if I say something, or if you hear something that actually is music to your ears, don't just run away to your office, talk to your lawyers, and sue someone or do something. We just obviously what I am doing is just reducing quite a length amount of theory into just a slide. So be very careful. This is just for explanatory purposes. So before doing anything, of course, speak to your the lawyer of your trust, or clarify with me. Right. So when we talk about Incoterms, we are actually not talking about transport. We're talking about international sale and purchase of goods. A buyer and a seller, they reach an agreement to buy any sort of goods. In our case, this could be cranes or large pieces of equipment, all the sorts of project cargo that we deal with on a daily basis in our charter party contracts, in our project cargo contracts. And a buyer and a seller will agree their main terms in a contract of a sale and purchase. And some parts of their agreement in the sale and purchase contract would be agreed by way of an Incoterm. So what are the Incoterms? Well, Incoterms, I think the best way to put it, I'm not going to give you a boring theoretical explanation. It's very early in the morning, especially here in England. So I think the best way is to look at the image you have on the screen. As you can see, Incoterms, you can actually see them here on this column. They're just acronyms, three little letters that have some sort of significance. And what is that significance? What do they mean? Well, the reality is that the International Chamber of Commerce has a good bunch of very smart people sitting in Paris. And they realize that when someone sells something to someone in another country, they spend a lot of time dealing with exactly the same points. Which are those points? Well, who is going to pack the goods in the factory? Do you sell the goods already in a box, or do I need to do this myself? How do I pick them up from your warehouse? How do I, who, you or me, who does this? Who puts them next to the ship? Actually, who loads them on board? Who puts this on board the ship? And who takes care of the ship? Are you gonna, is this included in the price? Is not? You follow me? And then the very same questions on the other side, the destination. Who's gonna discharge it? Who's gonna put it on the dock, on the port? Who's gonna take it to its final destination? Who's gonna take it to the warehouse? And in between, who's paying for customs? Who's paying for taxes, export or import taxes? So in any international sale and purchase of goods, these very same questions were being asked by buyers and sellers. So these guys at the ICC said, hang on a moment, why don't we create some sort of code or language that in very clear, simple terms, by using just one phrase, buyer and seller exactly know who's responsible for what, with all these things that we are wasting a lot of time on. So for example, if they choose X works, they know buyer and seller, you see seller is orange and buyer is green. They know that the seller's responsibility only consists of packing the goods and leaving them in the factory. For the buyer to collect, to put along on the port, to put on the cranes, to contract the main transport, and then the same at destination. Yes, so this would be the only duty of the seller. And as you can see, it goes from a little bit more, the seller does a little bit more, more, and then it goes up to when the buyer almost does nothing. Yeah, and on the other way around, you can see green, more until that. So all the Incoterms put together, as you can see, they offer a perfect balance between rights and duties of buyers and sellers. Careful, only with this, all right? Only with this. So put in very simple terms, this is what the Incoterms are, nothing more and nothing less. There is one very important feature of the Incoterms, which sometimes we get lost with in the transport industry when we have a breakbulk contract. Because we do have two contracts. One, as I'm saying, and as I'm trying to explain up until now, is the sale and purchase contract. Now, none of the viewers of this webinar, or none of those attending Antwerp Excel are yet coming into play here. Why? Well, because the sale and purchase contract we normally are not involved with. We're involved with the transport contract, but we need to be made aware that there are two contracts. So we have, as you can see, a buyer and a seller. We have an exporter or a seller that enters into an agreement with an importer or a buyer. And here is where they have the sale and purchase contract. What do we have in this contract? Well, our clients, normally this would be our clients, they will agree on the amount of goods, how many tons, how many kilos, how many units, how many pieces, which price, which quality, which make, all those sorts of things. Yeah? But next to the sale and purchase contract, we also have this transport contract. So this is where we are starting to come in the transport industry. Freight forwarders, carriers, and so on and so forth. Maritime lawyers like me, transport lawyers like me. This is where we actually properly step in. Okay, so we have a transport contract, and it would be there for the seller or the buyer, so the seller or the buyer, who will contract with the shipping line or the freight forwarder. All right. How do we know? How do we know who is going to contract with the logistics operator, the freight forwarder, or the shipping line directly, if they want to do it that way? Depending on what? Bang, depending on the Incoterm. Because as we have seen, and let me take you a little bit backwards, as we have seen, all the Incoterms that you can see in this column will deal with who actually is going to contract with me, because this is the main transport. Of course, this could be by plane, it could be by train, by road, but obviously on this type of projects, we're talking by sea. So let's pretend that it's always by sea. That's why we have the waves. Yeah. So the main transport will be contracted on an ex-works Incoterm by the buyer, FCA by the buyer, FAS, FOB, and from there, it would be the seller's responsibility to contract with us. You follow me? So it would depend on the Incoterm who will be our client. Yeah. Let me put it this way, because maybe visually it's better to be seen. So we have the contract of sale and purchase, where, you know, in principle we have nothing to do because it's just the seller and the buyer. And then on the second contract, we will have the seller coming to us, freight forwarder or carrier, for example, if they have agreed a CIF selling contract. Now this is important because Incoterms are selling terms. They are not buying terms. It's wrong to say that I'm buying CIF. It's I'm selling CIF, I'm selling FOB, I'm selling ex-works. Incoterms are selling terms, okay? So if the seller is selling on CIF terms to these guys, to the importer and the buyer, the seller has a duty to include the main transport on the price of the goods that he is selling. Therefore, it would be the exporter, the seller, coming to me, the freight forwarder or the carrier, to agree on a transport contract. On the contrary, can the buyer be part of the contract of transport with me, freight forwarder or carrier, in a break bulk contract? Of course. The buyer can be acquiring the goods by a seller who is selling on FOB terms. Well, if it's FOB, then it would be the duty of the buyer to come to me, freight forwarder, carrier, and agree the contract of transport. Yeah. So the transport contract would be, and of course this would be the chartering contract, the break bulk contract, the logistics contract. You know, however we want to call it, because every country calls it with its own terms. It would be either with the buyer or with the seller, depending on the Incoterm we are using. Okay, right. So quite a visual and practical way to see where do we place the Incoterms when we are dealing with break bulk contracts. Now, let's move on a little bit. I think by now we know that Incoterms are only binding between the buyer and the seller. And this is important because sometimes when I have freight forwarding clients, logistic operator clients, shipping brokers, all the players that we have in the transport industry, they sometimes come to me and say, "Oh, Miquel, I don't know if we can claim this to the seller because this is an FOB." I say, whoa, hang on. Whoa. Why are you applying yourself an Incoterm when you are not part of the sale and purchase contract? And I think this very simple exercise helps visualizing your risks as a logistics operator. Because as you can see on screen, Incoterms are not binding on freight forwarders, logistics operators, shipping lines, banks, insurance companies, because we are not part of the sale and purchase contract. Is this always the case? No, of course not. If you want to incorporate any part of what we have seen before with the Incoterms, then obviously you can incorporate it into the transport contract, but you have to put it into the transport contract. Otherwise, you will not be part of the Incoterm or the sale and purchase contract. Now, some clients, when I remind them of this, they tell me, "Oh, come on, but on the bill of lading, it says CIF." Well, whatever. I mean, on the face of the bill of lading, you can put, "I'm selling my house in the beach because there's a pandemic and I cannot use it right now." You can put whatever you like, because that does not affect the responsibility of the carrier or the freight forwarder issuing the face of the bill of lading. Yeah, bills of ladings on the back. They have tons of clauses. especially if they are liner bill of ladings. And they contain those exceptions that whatever is put on the face of the bill of lading is just for the benefit of the shipper or the party requesting it, that it does not obviously increase the liability of the carrier or the freight forwarder. Therefore, unless you incorporate somehow that part of the contract of sale and purchase into the transport contract, you as logistics operators, as freight forwarders, you would not be affected by the Incoterm at all. And I'm going to give you a practical example of that later on. Now, what are they not? Well, Incoterms are not the law of God told to Moses, and Moses sculpting it into marble rocks so that we cannot change it and it's sacrosanct. No. Incoterms, as I said before, are just terms created by very smart people sitting in Paris in the International Chamber of Commerce, but they are not the law. This has very serious consequences, because if you incorporate them into your sale and purchase contracts, as we have seen, courts will normally make them enforceable as if they were part of the international sale and purchase contract. But very carefully, you need to take into account that they can be varied. As I'm saying, it's not the law of Moses. They can be varied. And how can you vary this? Well, say, for example, that you are, buyer and seller, they reach an agreement and they say they agree on X works terms, which are probably the easiest for the seller. And the buyer says, oh, you know what, we agreed X works, that's fine, but can you please help me loading these goods into the lorry that will come to you, because honestly, I don't have contacts, I don't know how to do it. Your country has very weird legislation, and I don't know how to do it. Do you mind? And what would a prudent, reasonable seller do? Well, if we have a little heart, then we'll say, yeah, okay, I help you, whatever. I'm going to give you a hand because we want to sell, we want to have our clients happy. And what will happen is that if the goods get at destination and the goods arrive damaged, and there is a survey report saying that actually the loading process at origin is to blame, that is the cause of the loss, then what would you do? You as the buyer will go and say, hey, what did you do to my goods? These were very poorly loaded, and therefore I'm holding you responsible. The question is, can the seller then say, no, whoa, we agreed X works. We agreed X works, so X works, I'm not responsible for the loading of the goods. My duty under X works is just to leave them there on my factory. Big mistake, because again, as I'm showing in this slide, Incoterms can be varied by the actions of the parties. So you have to be very careful, because even if you agree for one Incoterm, but then you do something different, and this different can be customs, can be paying of taxes, can be anything else you like, then you will be caught because you have agreed to perform those duties. You follow me? So it's very important to have this into account. Now, what else are they not? Sometimes Incoterms are brought to the realms of the Valhalla. Yeah, they are, whoa, Incoterms. Well, I like to bring the souffle down a little bit with these things, because Incoterms only deal with what I've shown you before, with those little aspects of the transport phase in a sale and purchase contract. That's it. What happens if the client doesn't pay you? Well, nothing is there. You cannot find anything at all on the Incoterms. Incoterms don't deal with unpayment. Oh, but the goods didn't reach me, or the goods are of poorer quality. What do the Incoterms say? Nothing. Incoterms do not deal with a breach of contract of sale. Oh, the goods arrive late. What do the Incoterms say? Nothing. Incoterms don't deal with delay. They don't deal with sanctions, Iran, with tariffs, with force majeure events like we're living today. I'm sure, I don't know you, but the large number of consultations that I'm receiving these days are about, of course, pandemic, COVID-19, crew getting infected by the virus, or cargo not being able to reach the port because there are some inland regulations not allowing transport to take place because of coronavirus. So Incoterms don't deal with any of this. Yeah, with this you need to ask the lawyer or apply the relevant law where you are. Incoterms are just what they are, nothing more, nothing less. Okay, they are not the sacred formula to solve all our problems. Okay, they just deal with what I've shown you before. Now, how do we make these Incoterms, new Incoterms, applicable? Well, they came into force in January this year. And in order to use them, you just need to put them in your sale and purchase contract saying CIF 2020, FOB 2020, whatever it is, and then automatically it would be enforceable. If you do not mention the year, they should apply. But why do I put should in that manner? Well, you're leaving it open to the judge or to the arbitrator to decide whether it's 2020 or 2010, which is the previous version. You know that we have an Incoterms version every 10 years. That's why it's 2010, and now it's 2020. So, but you better put it. I mean, if you want to use 2020, it's good advice to put it there. So what's new? Well, again, there are not many new features that will affect the breakbulk industry in this version. There are a few, just a couple of three of them, which I will try to show you, which are some, they have some interesting features. Now, the DAT, if you ever use this Incoterm, disappears, okay? Now we have a new DPU. Why is that? Well, because DAT was thought for delivering the goods at a terminal, but the ICC realized that actually we're delivering it in other places other than a terminal. So that's why they created a DPU, which allows the goods being delivered anywhere you tell me to deliver the goods, I will leave them there, not only a port terminal. Okay, so that's one new small feature, I would say. Now, this is more interesting, however. Why? There is a distinction now between CIF and CIP. CIF, it's very widely used, as I'm sure you can imagine. This Incoterm has the duty for the seller to buy insurance, to insure the goods. Now, what used to happen is this. When the insurance was made available to the buyer, paid by the seller, of course, under the Incoterms duties, the duty was to insure 110% under ICC C level of insurance cover. Now, ICC doesn't stand, this is a dramatic coincidence, but it's not International Chamber of Commerce. It's the Institute Cargo Clauses based here in London. These clauses actually have different levels of cover, and C is actually the lowest. So what happened was that some goods arrive at a destination, they arrive damaged, and the buyer said, well, that's fine because I have an insurance. And then they went to the insurance, and the insurance said, I'm sorry, this is not covered. And then the buyer went to the seller and say, hey, what sort of crappy insurance cover did you buy? Well, the one that actually I am obliged to buy, which is ICC C level of insurance cover. Well, but they're not covering me. Well, my duty is to buy C. So obviously buyer and seller got into a large number of disputes. So the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce now, they decided to split. And they said, okay, so I'll tell you what, so if you want to sell under CIF, the insurance cover stays the same. You know that you have to insure under C. But if you have a buyer who wants to buy from you a higher level of insurance, you should use CIP. Because under CIP, you, seller, are obliged to buy insurance cover under A level, which is the maximum. So you are offering the maximum protection. Now, of course, this means that you're going to charge more because, you know, if the buyer wants better service, better cover, better quality, of course, the buyer needs to accept that it's going to pay more. But you can give them the two options. Listen, I can sell to you under CIP. The cost would be this, or if you want something cheaper, I can sell you CIF, which will have this insurance cover. So it's really up to you. So I think this is a very good distinction, a very good new feature that Incoterms offer, because especially with breakbulk contracts where cargo normally is expensive, it's not that we're selling a small stuff or transporting a small stuff in this industry. I think it's important to highlight to the clients that they have now this possibility. Now, There is also an interesting possibility with FCA, because I don't know if you have come across these situations, but I see it every now and then, quite regularly in my office, where shippers are put in bills of ladings are shippers against their will or against their knowledge, because when we have an ex-works contract, if you pick up the goods from my factory, I really don't mind if you just burn them down, put them down the river, destroy them. I don't mind what you do with the goods as soon as you take them out of my factory, because my duty ends at that point. But sometimes, because clients have documentary credits to finance the sale and purchase, they name the seller as a shipper. So what the ICC very smartly has thought of is to allow you under FCA, which is one step beyond of the ex-works, to allow you to receive a bill of lading, just so that you can comply your duties to get paid under the documentary credit, because you normally need to hand the bill of lading to the bank, don't you? But without you being part of the transport contract, which is fantastic, because if I am a shipper and I'm being told that I'm going to be put on a bill of lading, I say, no, 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 that's why I'm selling ex-works. I don't want to have anything to do with the transport contract, so don't put my name in there. And sometimes when freight forwarders or shipping lines come to the shippers, and I represent those shippers, because we maritime lawyers, we sometimes represent the shipper, sometimes the broker, sometimes the freight forwarder, sometimes the carrier. I actually spend a lot of time in showing that they are not part of this contract. Well, you're not part of the transport contract. Well, but they put me there. Well, they can put me as well if they want, or they can put, you know, Boris Johnson if they like to put them in the face of the bill of lading. But Boris Johnson will never be part of a bill of lading or of a contract of transport just because he's named on the bill of lading. Yeah. So the ICC created this very smart solution, so that if you are under FCA, you can ask for a bill of lading without being part specifically of the contract of transport. And I think this is a very good solution for these cases. Then we have a few very small changes for all the Incoterms you see on screen. You can use your own mode of transport. Oh, we couldn't use it before? Yes, yes, of course you could, because again, the ICC and the Incoterms are not the law of Moses, so you can basically do whatever you like. But if you come to a dispute, then the judge will see now in writing very clearly that you can use your own mode of transport, and that cannot be used as a defense against you. Yeah. And again, a lot of security measures are being explained, and the role of information is being provided. And the same with the next slide. I'm gonna link it together, because if there is one thing that these new Incoterms have, is a lot of information. I sometimes refer to them as Incoterms for dummies, because even if you know nothing about Incoterms, if you have the little booklet that the ICC sells to you, you will find a lot, endless amount of information. Why to use ex-works and not FCA, as you can see on the screen, why to use DDP and not DDU. So actually, if you have the time and the patience to read it, it provides with a lot of information. And I think this is also a good feature, because, you know, sometimes, yes, there are experts in international trade, as I assume all of us here, but sometimes if you are just a small manufacturer who got lucky enough to sell your goods abroad, maybe, you know, international trade is not your core area of expertise. So the more information you have, the better. Right. Very importantly, this is one of the last things I will mention about Incoterms 2020, the new features, the passing of the risk. There was some doubt in the previous Incoterms as to when the risk passes from the buyer, from the seller to the buyer. And there was this misconception, I think, that the risk passed when the goods went over the rail of the ship. But that's wrong. That has never been the case. And actually, Incoterms 2020 now clarify this. In order the risk to pass, it needs to be on board physically touching the deck, the hulls, yeah, which is interesting for us in breakbulk contracts, because when we put the goods on board, then we know that the risk may be passing, depending of course on the Incoterm, but you can see on the screen how it works. Now, I promised to give you practical example of how to deal with the disputes between buyer and seller. Say that the seller has contracted a freight forwarder, the seller has agreed to sell on CIF terms, and if so, it means that our client is the seller. And therefore, a common situation would be that the buyer refuses to pay the costs at destination. And you, of course, you go and claim the seller because he is your client. He came to you and actually instructed you to take this from A to B. Yeah? But the seller says, oh, but this is CIF. Under CIF, the buyer is responsible to pay for the costs at destination. What do you think? Is this right or wrong? What should we do? Shall we go and claim the buyer? Because under CIF, CIF says that these costs are for the buyer. No, of course not. If you do so, you are a very kind person, and it's all right to do so. But you need to make very clear that you are only doing this because of a commercial gesture that you want to do. Why? Because don't forget that your client is the seller. The transport contract is between you and the seller. So the correct answer in this practical case that I've shown you is, well, listen, Mr. Seller, you pay me because actually you owe me under the transport contract. And then if under the sale and purchase contract, you think that you can claim this to the buyer on your bike, this is down to you, but you have to pay me because I am incurring these costs as destination only because you came to me. We have this contract, and here we say that you have to pay this. You understand? So this is why I think it's very important to have this distinction, and that's why I spent a bit of time explaining to you the difference between one and the other. Now, in order to finish this webinar, I think I still have 3 minutes. I wanted to tell you something very important for your breakbulk contracts, and it is the applicable law and jurisdiction clause. In your contracts, you may deal with Incoterms, you may deal with who deals with this, who pays for that. All the breakbulk contracts and logistic contracts that I see are never ending. Some of them have hundreds of pages. They deal with almost everything you can think of, but sometimes it's surprising that you don't include an applicable law and jurisdiction clause. And this is super important. You should actually start with this. This should be the first clause you need to think of. This contract is subject to which law? Okay, and if something goes wrong, where do we go? Now, obviously, I'm talking to you from London. I'm an English solicitor, and most of the logistic contracts that I deal with obviously are based under English law and subject to London arbitration. In another seminar, if you like, we can talk about London arbitration and how these disputes are being resolved here in London, because there are many interesting aspects for all of us. But I thought it would be good to give you as a freebie just an ordinary clause. Now, if you want to do this subject to Dutch law, well, fantastic. Laws of Holland, or you want to make this subject to the arbitration in whatever you like, that's fine. But my purpose of this slide is just put it there, okay? And obviously, being based in London, and because London arbitration is very popular in the maritime world, some people ask me sometimes, well, Miquel, but now you have Brexit, this is over, it's not going to be in any arbitration anymore. Well, fake news, this is fake news. As you can see on screen, this was made by Holman, Fenwick and Willen, and it shows the maritime references in arbitrations that actually come to London during the first 6 months of the year. So as you can see, London, we have been, what, the referendum of Brexit was 4 years ago, okay? 4 years ago already, all right? And here we are. the impact on the shipping industry in London has been none. And as you can see, London continues to be the preferred method of resolving your disputes under your sale and purchase contract, under your breakbulk contracts, under your project cargo contracts, logistic contracts, obviously charter party disputes, and the rest of the forums who claim to be, well, yeah, up and coming, a solution. And, you know, it's very rare to see something there. As you can see, London continues to deal with it. Right, 5 seconds away from my time, so very English for me to use just the necessary time and to let you go and carry on with your daily business. It's been a pleasure, and if you have any questions, I think Mark now it's gonna feed them to me, or otherwise I think in the presentation you have my email. I'm happy to share this presentation. If you want to have it, just drop me an email and I'll be glad to share it with you. So that's all from me, Mark.
Thank you very much, Miquel. Really interesting. I think there's a lot of learning there. I was just thinking or saying to the team that we had a next gen session yesterday, and I thought a lot of the audience there would probably find this interesting too. So we're going to make everything available on demand. Mm-hmm. And share it. Just have to add your email address and that's it. I suppose from my perspective, I was just wondering at which stage do you have most of your arbitration? If you're talking about that long range of the different Incoterms and what the terms relate to in terms of the buying and selling, where do you find that there is the most contention, I suppose?
Well, with breakbulk contracts, obviously the area where you can find the larger number of disputes is latem and demurrage. The time used for loading and discharging. Why? Well, because, you know, ships, you know, sometimes they encounter many situations which make the ship being delayed or cargo not being available, or stevedores going on strike, or the cargo not being ready, or then the master asking for more damage or security measures, and that involves time. But time in this contract, it is of the essence, and the parties agree a certain amount of time included in the contract for loading and discharge. Now, if you exceed that time, that is an expensive business. You are really going into a very expensive area of the business. And even if it's little time, it climbs up so quick that sometimes for maybe 1 day or 2 days, you have claims in the region of the $50,000 or $100,000, $150,000, just for small things. So if I have to pick up one area of dispute, that would definitely be the most common one, the one that comes more regularly into my desk. But there are many other, of course. This is a very complex business, and there are other areas. But if you ask me to pick up one, I would choose this one. Okay,
thank you. And you mentioned obviously Brexit. And there's been very little or no effect on from your perspective on the shipping industry. Mm-hmm. Does Incoterms kind of transcend all trading states? It doesn't really make a difference what the agreements are between the regions. There is no effect.
No, as I mentioned in the presentation, Incoterms only deal with what they deal with, and they are not a sacred or secret formula to resolve all our issues. Incoterms do not care about Brexit. They do not care about boundaries. They don't care about what do we do in our country. But what I can see after 4 years of the referendum is that the impact of Brexit in our international trade has been none. And I'm talking as statistics. I'm not saying whether I'm a Brexiteer or a Remainer or we can all have our opinion, and that's fine. But the facts are that London continues to be the world capital for insurance, for the shipping industry, for some offices have opened a new office in Rotterdam or in Amsterdam or here and there, with 1-2 people just to deal with the European business, but the business is still in the city. And that's a fact. That's a fact. The same goes with breakbulk disputes. No one is going to Rotterdam or to Antwerp or to Hamburg or to Le Havre or to wherever they still come to London, because London still offers the same level of trust, knowledge, tradition, and good service that it has been able to offer for the past centuries. So
Well, similar to finance and trading, I suppose, they still go to London, also due to a mixed a time zone that works.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to finance and insurance, everything ends up in Lloyd's, the Lloyd's of London, and the Lloyd's of London is still there. I was there this very morning. It's still there. The building is still there. People still will go there to work. And yes, the Lloyd's of London, they have a new office in the continent, but with a very, very small team. The main meal is still served in London, and I don't think that Brexit is going to change that, because we're going to deal with the European institutions in different terms, but we're not leaving Europe. We're still here.
Indeed. Okay, well, it doesn't look like we've got any further questions. I mean, there's obviously a lot to take in. I'm sure that people are very kind to have shared your presentation, and we'll certainly make that available online or to anybody that requests it. So yeah, please get in contact if you would like Miquel's presentation, and hopefully we can do a follow-up session live at Antwerp Excel in March, all hoping to get the industry together next year. But yeah, I'll thank you for your time, and I think as there's something, just one thing, no, just a thank you from Patrick has come in on the chat. So I think we will leave the session there. And as I say, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And if you have any post-event questions, again, you have my email, or you can contact me or Mark, and we will be delighted to respond. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you. And just to answer Krista, she's just asked, will the handouts be shared? Yes, they will. We'll put you in contact directly with Miquel, or we can have them downloaded. It's easy. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.